Hello, welcome to Glasgow Rangers Nation with me, your host Owen James, channel that brings you all your latest Rangers news, all for free, guys. There is no paywalls here on the channel. We don't charge you for the content. If you do want to support the channel, then obviously give us a subscribe, and also as well, if you want to help out, obviously become a member for only 99p, or press the super thanks button below and donate a little bit of money to help the channel. Right, guys, look, we're going to talk a little bit of Barry's regrets, what Craig Moore has said about Barry Ferguson missing out on the Rangers job after Craig spoke to Barry. We've also got Russell Martin as well, a bit of Russell Martin news. He is still in the running to be the new Rangers manager. We've got his news. He has picked a right-hand man for the job, apparently, if he was to be fortunate enough to get the Rangers job. And a new name, yes, that's right, a new name has emerged to add to the list of Davide Ancelotti, Steven Gerrard, and of course Russell Martin. Yes, a new name, guys. A former Ranger as well, which will all make all those of you who want the Rangers man very, very happy indeed. Right, let's obviously talk a little bit about that. First of all, I'm going to start with an apology. Apologies for cancelling the live last night. Had to. Look, I'll be honest with you, I'm finding the concept of lives really difficult at the moment with everything that's going on in the family and with myself at this moment in time. We will get back to lives very soon. As I've always said, that I value your input and I value what you have to say. So we will get back to those very soon. But, I find the sort of thing very difficult. It's a lot easier to do these types of videos. I've got time to stop, to re-record, to edit, etc., etc., take bits out, when things go wrong or when, it just gets a bit too much. Right, we're going to talk, obviously, a little bit about what Craig Moore said about Barry. We're going to talk about the new name. But let's start off with, obviously, this bit here. Let's start off with what former Rangers player Craig Moore has been saying about Barry Ferguson missing out on the job. And according to Craig, it's no surprise that Barry is gutted to have missed out on the Rangers job. I think, near the end, there was I still think a belief with Barry Ferguson that he thought he could get the job. Despite the fact I think a lot of people kind of knew that this was never really an option. It was never really going to be something that would happen, I honestly feel. And look, I've got a little few reflections on why what Barry did may actually have hurt the club long term. We'll talk a little bit about that after we've spoken about what Craig Moore had to say. So Craig Moore did talk in an interview that he gave to Go Radio, the former radio station of Barry Ferguson, about what Barry had said. This is what Craig had to say. He said, "Look, I did manage to get hold of Barry yesterday once I heard the breaking news, and it's fair to say he was disappointed. He felt very empty because he felt that he could do a real job. He had a clear vision of what he could do and what needed to be done. But by all accounts, the decision makers at Rangers wanted to go down a more experienced path." Now, that's a really interesting piece of information, which we'll come back to in a moment. So it'll be interesting to see what is in terms of that, who it is in terms of that particular person. I think the one word that maybe I still don't think that the new people get is they still think Rangers is a project, and Barry was very clear, as am I. I'm sure a lot of Rangers supporters are. Glasgow Rangers is not a project club. It's a club about getting a team that can go and win trophies. So it's going to be interesting to see who the person's going to be, how well they hit the ground. You must hit the ground running, as a great club as Rangers Football Club are in terms of their support. If it doesn't start well next season, that support will fade and fade very quickly, in my opinion. So some interesting words there from Craig Moore as regards what Barry had to say about missing out on the job. And look, I think it's entirely understandable that Barry is obviously disappointed that he didn't get the job. I think there was a real kind of belief that Barry saw this as a bit of an audition in the end, that he felt that he hoped that if he did well enough that he could get the job. However, look, I think as time went on, as results came in, as performances came in, particularly in the SPL, particularly domestically, where we struggled to beat, those lesser clubs. Yes, Barry did very well against Celtic. Don't get me wrong. The win at Parkhead was excellent. Obviously, the draw at Ibrox, not so, but still was a decent result. The fact that Brendan Rodgers, as manager of Celtic, didn't manage to beat Barry Ferguson, all feathers in Barry's cap. However, if you look at his win ratio was poor for 40%. It might have been 35. I can't remember. It was the lowest. Probably it's the lowest of any Rangers manager ever. I think, you look at that defensively, we were rated 11th or 12th in every defensive category for the end of the season under Barry's management. Our home record under Barry was absolutely shocking. So, I think the performances weren't there. And I think, the team, yes, the team do carry some of the blame. But, as I've said on numerous occasions, and I know a lot of people don't agree with me on this, but I think, the majority of football analysts would, is that if you had a real, genuine, good football coach, a real, genuine football coach can organise and get the best out of the players that he or she has got and get them to play to a style that will suit those players and get results. That's what a good coach does. And I think, you can blame the players all you want, but realistically, any coach should be able to coach up Rangers players, any sort of Rangers players, to beat the likes of St Mirren, Motherwell, etc. It was interesting, I think, as well, that I think because Barry had this sense that he thought he could get the job, that's why we got the team selections that we did. That's why we got the continual selection of Tavernier, of Dessers, bringing in of Lawrence off the bench, even though Lawrence has now left. Balogun, obviously, who has now left. I do feel that Barry missed a real opportunity to actually help the club long term. I think the decisions he made were very short term and very much in his own interests rather than the interest of Rangers Football Club. He wanted the job, he wanted to prove he could do the job, which is fair enough. You would do as well if you were given the opportunity, and that's why, like I said, he picked the players that he did, rightly or wrongly. People talk obviously about his selections. People talk about the 18 goals Slaviel Dessers scored. I think you've got to remember that was in the SPL. I think, not playing Hamza, him picking continually Tavernier, him picking continually Balogun. I think he really did miss an opportunity to really use some of the players who've got a long-term future at this club. And look, with the best will in the world, and, I'm not going to sit here and hate on him, but Slaviel Dessers does not have a long-term future at this football club. He's 31 years old. Realistically, he's got another year, 18 months left at the top level, and after that his career will take a downturn. That's not me being anti-Slaviel Dessers. That is me stating a fact with the majority of strikers around the world in world football. Yes, you get the odd freak example. However, the majority of strikers, once they pass 30, tend to downturn in their career. Tavernier, another one who is severely on the downturn in his career, as we saw, in numerous occasions, his performances defensively were exceptionally bad. Proper being picked. Again, poor footballer. I think there was options taken there that were not the right ones. Now, why do I feel that he hurt the future of the club? Well, I thought, this was the opportunity to really see some of those youngsters, to get some of those youngsters involved. Now, the season was over. There was nothing left to play for other than Barry wanting to get the job. And that's why I'm saying he was being selfish. Bailey Rice, Finlay Curtis, Clinton Ciala, Xander Hutton, for example, players who, we look at and we kind of think, have these got Paul Uncio? Have they got a future at this football club? Have they got the ability to do it at the highest level? Have they got the ability to play? Have they got the ability to, go out there and prove themselves? Have they got the ability to go and save Rangers some money? Now, I think, that he really did miss an opportunity to use these youngsters more and to start them and to play them. People say, well, the fans would have got on their backs if they'd lost. Well, we lost anyway, in a lot of games that we should have won. So I don't understand how you would think they would do any worse than some of the dross that was on the football field. I don't get the wisdom of bringing Tom Lawrence on when the guy's leaving. Why not bring Uncio on? Why not bring Finlay Curtis on? Players that have actually got a future at this football club, hopefully. Certainly them signing new deals has kind of indicated that they do. So I do think that Barry has hurt the future of the football club to some degree because, like I said, this was the perfect opportunity to play these youngsters. Now, realistically, the new manager is not going to use them at the start of next season. He's going to use the new signings. He's going to use existing players. He's not going to play youngsters because he doesn't know how good they are. He doesn't know how they'll cope playing at the highest level. He's not going to risk them because he's not going to want to get off to a bad start. Hence, whereas I think, near the end of the season where you have got nothing to play for, where there is just dead rubber after dead rubber after dead rubber, why not play those youngsters? Why not have a look and see, give them a run of games? Can they play? Can they play at this level? Can they cope with the pressure of playing for Rangers? And I personally think that Curtis, Rice and Ciala, Hutton, etc. would have put in a hell of a better shift than a lot of the players who were picked ahead of them by Barry Ferguson in his quest for his job. Whilst Craig Moore's got a point, I think, at the end of the day, Barry did, I think, has to some degree hurt the future of the football club, because this, like I said, was the perfect opportunity to actually use these young kids and to give these young kids the opportunity to prove themselves at the highest level. Another interesting point that he made in that quote was the fact that he said that the owners wanted to bring in an experienced person. Now, does that appear to rule out the likes of Ancelotti, for example? Davide Ancelotti, who does have a lot of experience as an assistant but has no experience as a manager. Does that rule out someone like Russell Martin, who hasn't got a vast amount of managerial experience? Does that appear to indicate that someone like Steven Gerrard is someone who, yes, doesn't have a massive, but has a lot more experience than those two other candidates? The other name that's emerged as well, which we'll get onto, he's got a lot more experience as well than those two candidates. So, does that rule those people out? I don't know. I think possibly not. Maybe he was just in terms of just coaching experience rather than managerial experience. But certainly an interesting point, nonetheless, to come out of that quote from Craig Moore about what Barry Ferguson said post this decision. Now, look, I know this will make me unpopular with some Rangers fans, and I'll say it, and I'm not hating on Barry here. I love Barry. I think Barry is an absolute legend. I think as a player, he was absolutely fabulous. As a captain of Rangers, he was amazing. He is a Rangers man. He loves the club. I've got no doubts. But as a manager, he's awful. He genuinely is terrible. And I'll repeat what I've said on a number of occasions. If he had not played for the club and captained the club, and he had come in and done the job that he did at the end of the season, you'd all be calling for his head. Guarantee it. Right, let's move it on a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about what Russell Martin. We will get to the new name that's emerged. Hang on for it. It is a name that you're going to want to hear. Right, let's talk a little bit of Russell Martin. Now, Russell Martin obviously is someone who is believed to still be a candidate for the Rangers manager job. Russell Martin is someone who has a very distinct style of football, likes to play in a progressive attacking style of football, likes to, pass the ball, likes to play football the right way. Now, there is a lot of stories indicating that Russell Martin could well be going to Leicester City. That's one of the stories that is going around at this moment in time. Now, what the truth of that is, I don't know. It would appear to make sense for Leicester. Leicester obviously I think are likely to, obviously lose Ruud van Nistelrooy, who's done a disastrous job as the manager of Leicester City. Leicester, but absolutely awful in their Premier League campaign. And, look, I don't want to get into, particularly in this video, why Leicester got relegated, because it's not a Leicester channel. It's not an English Premier League channel. And, we all know why, the Leicester, the Ipswiches, etc., got relegated, because of the fact there was a massive, massive gap between the EFL Championship and the English Premier League. So, Russell Martin obviously is a Scottish, played for Scotland as a Scottish international, despite the fact he was born in Brighton. In terms of his managerial experience, he has managed Milton Keynes Dons between 2019 and 2021. He then went on to become a Swansea City manager between 21 and 23. And then between 23 and 24, he was the Southampton manager. Obviously, getting Southampton promoted back to the Premier League. Yes, he was sacked whilst in the Premier League season, with Southampton rock bottom and on track to get the lowest number of points ever in a Premier League campaign. Something, thankfully, for Southampton fans, they escaped. In terms of his managerial career, he started at Milton Keynes Dons, following on from Paul Tisdale. He obviously had a very much that's where he developed his initial possession-based football style, which got a lot of plaudits, got a lot of analysts and pundits saying, what a fantastic style of football it was, and what a great a great job he was doing there. One stat from that point, in 2021, his side scored a 56 pass move goal, which was a British record at the time. And in fact, at the end of the 2020-2021 season, MK Dons were the third highest possession team in games in Europe, behind only Manchester City and Barcelona. His team also had the highest number of touches in the opposition box as well in League One. But that first season, he finished 13th with MK Dons. He was then obviously transfer. He then moved to Swansea City. He became Swansea City's head coach and was appointed before the Championship season in 2021-2022 started. Again, mixed results there. Swansea finished 15th, and then the following season he improved the club to finish 10th. It was when he became manager of Southampton that he obviously then moved Southampton up, got Southampton promoted to the Premier League. In terms of his stats, just pure stats as a manager, his win percentage at MK Dons is 37.5%. His win percentage at Swansea City was 36%. His win percentage at Southampton was 45%. Certainly that was a hell of a lot higher before the Premier League. So, again, someone with a very mixed background. Now, apparently, if he was to be appointed Rangers manager, and I think he is an outsider for the job, if I'm being honest with you, I think the Leicester City link is very strong. He apparently would appoint former Rangers player Maurice Ross as his assistant manager. Some of you may remember Maurice Ross playing for Rangers, a fullback at that point in time. Apparently that's who Russell Martin has targeted to become his assistant if he was fortunate enough to get the Rangers job. He is, like I said, one of the candidates still. He is still being considered according to numerous sources, both north and south of the border. Like I said, Maurice Ross and him apparently have been friends ever since going through the SFA's coaching programme together. Ross was most recently employed as a coaching role with Fleetwood Town, a role he quit because he wanted to return home to Scotland. Maurice Ross spent 5 years with Rangers before he moved to Sheffield Wednesday. He has had opportunities to manage, though. He has managed in both Norway and the Faroe Islands. Apparently, that's Maurice Ross, that is, before coming back to Scotland. And apparently Russell Martin has already earmarked him for a place in the dugout if he was to be appointed new Rangers manager. So, interesting there that Maurice Ross obviously is considered obviously someone who's played for the club, someone who understands the club, someone who, gets the club. And I think that's an interesting appointment by Russell Martin, obviously, showing that he does want someone to come in who has an understanding of Rangers, who understands what it is to play for the club, who understands, the demands of the supporters. And I think, certainly having someone like that alongside Russell Martin would certainly help. Like I said, Ross has had a wide and varied experience. He spent those 5 years at Rangers, making 78 appearances, scoring 2 goals. He also had time with Sheffield Wednesday, Wolves, Millwall, the fantastically named Viking, Koscielspor, Aberdeen, Beijing Guan, Motherwell, Livingston and FK Vidar. In terms of his management experience, he's managed Sola, Egersunds, Roy Vikingur. He was the assistant at Notts County. He was at Cowdenbeath for a bit. And like I said, most recently, he was with Fleetwood Town as a manager. So, as an assistant manager, sorry. So, look, I think obviously good experience. And like I said, Russell Martin does, I think, appear to, want to bring in that Rangers man, someone who does get the club. Guys, I'd love to know your thoughts. Is Russell Martin someone you'd look at? I've got to say, I am kind of very torn a little bit. I do like the way that Russell Martin plays football. Don't get me wrong. I think he plays football extremely well. I think he plays with the right style. He plays with a good attacking style, a high press. He plays the game in the right way. My concern is that he's not had the best track record in management. If you look at his time at MK Dons and at Southampton, getting them relegated, and obviously at Swansea as well. And I think one of the big criticisms of Russell Martin during his management spell at Southampton was that he didn't have a plan B. His plan B appeared to be to do plan A, but better with different players, very Philippe Clement-esque, but obviously with a better style of football. Which you've got to kind of be concerned about to some degree. Certainly when Rangers will come up against the low block in Scotland, you want someone who has plan A, plan B, plan C, different ways to get round those different tactical challenges that will be placed against you. So, look, I think, that is certainly something that perhaps is a drawback for Russell Martin. And, I'm very torn on this. I wouldn't, if he was appointed manager, I'd obviously get behind him. I wouldn't be devastated, but I still have my sort of worries about him being the next Rangers manager. Right, okay, let's move on. Our final topic on this video, guys. I'd love to get your thoughts on this. So, who is this name that has suddenly emerged into the kind of the ether when it comes to be the next manager? Well, it is Hajduk split manager and former Rangers player Rina Gattuso. There's a number of sources down here in England reporting that Gennaro Ivan Gattuso, the Italian just psycho Italian bulldog, is someone apparently who has also been considered for the Rangers manager's job. I don't know if this is a bit of misdirection, a bit of media speculation, a bit of media clickbait. It could well be. It could be a bit of lazy journalism. The fact that Rangers are still looking for a manager. Gattuso used to play for Rangers. He was loved when he was up here. He's to some degree he's a Rangers man. He gets the club. And he's a very passionate guy. I mean, I don't know if any of you have seen some of his interviews. Some of his interviews are absolutely hilarious. I mean, there was the one of the things at Marseille when he was talking about his team. He said, sometimes really good, sometimes really shit. It was just fantastic, absolutely fantastic. The guy is an absolute legend. Tough tackler, a real, fighter. A guy who's managerial, his playing career. Obviously, he's dominated by that spell with AC Milan between 1999 and 2012, where he made 335 appearances, scoring 9 goals for the Rossoneri. An absolutely outstanding time with AC Milan. I mean, he won 2 Serie A titles. He won the 2 Champions Leagues, 2 UEFA Super Cups, 1 FIFA World Club Cup, 1 Coppa Italia, won 2 Italian Super Cups. This is a guy who, had a glittering career. Italian international, won the World Cup in 2006 with Italy. His playing career is glistening, isn't it? It really is. He's had a kind of real roller coaster ride when it comes to being manager as well. He started off with Sion in Switzerland before being manager of Palermo for a bit, Crete, Pisa. He was manager of Milan for 2 years, AC Milan, Rossoneri. He was manager of Napoli for 2 years, Valencia, Marseille, and Hajduk Split. In terms of his managerial statistics, with Sion, he was pretty poor, to be honest with you. He only won 25% of his games. With Palermo, he won 37.5% of his games. With Crete, 32.5%. With Milan, 48%. Now, if you consider Milan are a big, massive club in Italy, and one of the I've kind of fallen away as kind of one of the dominant powers in Italian football. 48% is pretty poor. Napoli was 56%, which is pretty good in the Italian game. With Valencia, 31%, although Valencia have been a struggling team of late with obviously massive financial concerns and financial worries, not enabling them to recruit and meaning they've got to sell a lot of their top talent. With Marseille was 37.5%, and currently with Hajduk Split it's 45.2%, overall 42.67%. So he's hardly got the best statistics, has he, of any manager. But like I said, he does have that Rangers thing on his side, and he is a very passionate guy, a very psychotic guy at times. And I've probably told this story before, but I'm kind of reminded of the story that's told about Gennaro Gattuso. That it was a training session. Walter Smith was taking the training session as the manager, obviously, and it was before an Old Firm game. And they're playing a practice game, and Gattuso is flying around the pitch, absolutely smashing into people, sending them flying into the air, taking them out, kicking them, smacking them, just getting really stuck in. Walter Smith is on the sidelines, absolutely doing his nut, going, oh my God, we're going to end up with no players left, we're going to end up with some injuries to key players, we've got to tell him to calm down. Now, at that time, Gattuso's English was very poor. So Walter Smith turned to his assistants and he said, someone speaks to any of you speak Italian, someone tell him. And at that point, somebody pointed out that Gazza spoke some Italian because of Gazza's spell with Lazio in Italy. So Walter Smith calls Gazza over to the sideline and says, Gazza, go and tell Rina to calm down because we don't want any injuries, just to take it easy. Gazza says, all right, boss, goes over in broken Italian, tells Gattuso to do something, then witness Gattuso flying into more tackles, kicking more people and getting stuck in, Walter pulling his hair out. It emerges later that Gazza apparently said to Gattuso, the boss says you're not putting in enough effort, you've got to start getting stuck in, mate. That's the story. Anyway, typical Gazza, typical Gattuso. Great days, glory days, fantastic days, back in the day. Love that story. I love any Gazza story. Every Gazza story you hear about his time at Rangers, whether it's the Gordon Jury and the fish story, the fireworks story, the waders story, the whatever story you tell about his time at Rangers, it's just absolutely hilarious. The guy was just amazing, and I've got to say, one of my all-time favourite players. Just one of the reasons why, I absolutely love Gazza to bits and always will. But interesting name to emerge. Again, I wouldn't want Gattuso as manager. I just think his past history, his managerial history is not good enough. Like I said, I think if that was anyone else, you'd definitely say no to that one. I do think that people like Marco Rosa, David Wagner, Davide Ancelotti are much better candidates than Gennaro Gattuso. So look, I'd love to know your thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comments on that one. Look, I'll be honest with you, and I'm going to repeat what I heard David Edgar say earlier. No one knows. No one knows. Well, actually, no. As David Edgar said earlier, there's 3 people who know who the next manager is going to be. Elmer Fudd, Patrick Stewart, Kevin Thelwell and Greta Steinson. They know. Maybe Andrew Kavanagh and Parag Marath. Maybe they know as well. I think they probably will. So they're the people who know. But no one else is saying anything. Nothing's leaking out. There's certainly no connections to the board these days or to the people within the club, because this has been kept very much within the new ownership. As was said on TalkSport today, this will be something that will be concluded by mid-June still. That's when it's thought to be actually finalised. The 49ers will be the owners of Rangers by mid-June. So the fake over, of course, will become a true over, despite what Professor Declan O'Reilly of the Parkhead University of Celtic Studies may tell you. So look, no one really knows. I think there's an awful lot of gossip going around that it's going to be Steven Gerrard. That has its merits, that has its negatives, it has its positives, it has its drawbacks. And look, we've spoken about Steven Gerrard a number of times. The drawback, obviously, that he only won 1 trophy in 9 when he was here. The positives being that he is someone who knows the club, someone who can hit the ground running from day one, someone who is obviously already kind of committed to bringing in a Rangers man as his assistant, bringing in Hendo as a player coach, I think will be a good move as well. Henderson has still got a lot to offer as a player, experienced, high quality footballer, played for England very, very recently. And as well, I think he's someone that's, can attract players. That's another thing. I heard Danny Murphy talking about Steven Gerrard and saying that, Steven Gerrard, one of the things you've got to think with Gerrard is he can attract players because he's a name. He's someone who attracts top players because it's Steven Gerrard. That is a big thing. So that, I think, that I said, there are the positives, there are the negatives. His negatives, obviously, as well, that his last serious job that he did, I don't really count Al Ettifaq as a serious job, not in the Saudi Retirement League. The Blood Money League, the job that he did with Villa was very poor. And then Unai Emery comes in and makes an instant fist of it with pretty much the same players. So, yes, there's that drawback, but there's positives and negatives with every candidate. There really seriously is. So, look, like I said, no one knows who the new manager is going to be. No one knows realistically what's going to happen this summer. I think it's going to be a very interesting summer, a very exciting summer with lots of incomings and outgoings at the club. Fascinating stuff, guys. An exciting time to be a Rangers fan. A really interesting time to be a Rangers fan. Guys, I'd love to know your thoughts. Get your comments in, get your thoughts in. Sorry this hasn't been live, but I wanted to get something out there today for you to watch and enjoy, hopefully. If you've enjoyed the content, please like, comment, share and subscribe. Obviously, you can become a channel member for as little as 99p. That would be fabulous if you could join. If you can't, obviously, you don't want to have that commitment of every month, then pass a super thanks at the bottom just to donate a bit of money to help support this free Rangers channel. Guys, thank you for watching Glasgow Rangers Nation. As always, on the way out, just remember one thing for me, one very simple thing for me. We are the people.